It's April 16th, the day after Tax Day, and the day after Jackie Robinson Day, which I prefer to think of April 15th as across baseball. But it's time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. I'm Brian Walton, and this is Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Hello, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. And all of you out there have obviously found us. This video is available at thecardinalnation.com, and the audio form is available each week at the Scoops Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. So, since the last time we've been together, the vaunted pitching pipeline of the St. Louis Cardinals has taken a couple of hits. One major hit and one hit that we don't really know yet how major it is. And the first move happened on Sunday when the Memphis Redbirds placed left-hander Quinn Mathews on the 7-day injured list. Then the reason is shoulder soreness, as John Mozeliak told the media on Monday. I don't know about you, but anytime I hear shoulder, I obviously am especially concerned. We haven't heard anything, at least I haven't seen anything more about the severity of the injury or what's going to happen. But in his first three starts of the year, I think it was pretty clear that Mathews was not himself. And this is obviously a reaction to stop, before any further damage is done, I guess. What's your reaction to the news and with Mathews?
Just bum for him, bum for the organization, bum for fans. I was obviously prospects. One of the best parts about following prospects is the excitement that comes with something new. And we were all but certain that Quinn Mathews was going to be able to make a major league debut in 2025, and that could still happen. But some of that excitement gets zapped away. I'm just hoping that it's something small, minor. We saw that his velocity was down in his most recent start, and then to go on the IL. I hope it's just.
By the way, and his control was way off. I mean, he walked 6 batters in 2 straight starts, and that's as much as he would walk in a month in normal times.
Yeah. Last year he got off to kind of a similar start in Palm Beach, where he couldn't find the strike zone, and then he realized that he could, and then he kind of zoned in. So I had in the back of my mind that maybe, just maybe, it was something like that. But I think back to his first start, Brian, where he was having a lot of trouble getting loose, and you could see him kind of doing this on the mound. This won't be good for the podcast people, but you could see him kind of gyrating on the mound to try to get loose. So hopefully it's just something minor. Just all right, his velocity's down. We're going to shut him down. We're going to let him rehab, and hopefully come late May, June, he's back on a mound at AAA.
And then the next piece of news, but you're right. I just want to make one comment just to echo what you said, and that is, this year for the Cardinals is about hope, right? It's about hope, hoping that the young players step up, hoping that some of the minor league guys contribute. And McGreevy's kind of the guy that's been on the front step, but Mathews is right behind him based on the year that he had last year. I mean, those 202 strikeouts that he threw last year in top minor league baseball, but it also was 146 some innings. And Mathews himself admitted he was tired at the end of the year. And that was part of his explanation why his AAA debut in September didn't go as well as he hoped. But you just wonder, you hope that heavy workload that Mathews had through his college days and then into his pro years haven't caught up with him.
Yeah, that's the key. A lot of heavy workload on that young man's arm.
Yeah. So the other piece of news was not as good because it was more definitive. And, we knew from the start of the season that Cooper Hjerpe was going to be on the injured list at Springfield. We knew that he was rehabbing still in Jupiter. We knew that he had elbow concerns last season. The season prior to that, 2023, he had surgery to remove some loose cartilage in that elbow. Mm-hmm. And now it's to the point where Hjerpe will need, or maybe he's already undergone, Tommy John surgery. And the initial word was that we may not see him now until the middle of 2026. And usually, a lot of times, the Tommy Johns were more optimistic that maybe if a guy, everything went right, he could be back inside of 12 months. This is more like it's going to be 14 months or 15 months is kind of the word out. Am I reading too much into that, or are they just trying to be cautious, or what?
It seems like cautious. Obviously this is a more than cost controlled asset, and they're just trying to bring him back slowly. They understand how valuable he is to the team. And I think that part of that is we just want to make sure that we're not setting an unrealistic time period and he can kind of go at his own pace. this one, obviously, for anybody who's listened to our podcast, this one hit me a little bit harder, not just because of the severity of it, but because in a lot of ways, Cooper Hjerpe is the most unique and most exciting arm in the organization. Tekoa Roby, Tink Hens, Quinn Mathews, all these guys. But yeah, like you're doing right now, Brian. Yeah, that left-handed, it just all of it, his stuff, where it comes from, the way it profiles. It's such a blow. And it's a bummer too, because I don't feel like Cardinal fans have really got a chance to experience Cooper Hjerpe in all of his in all of his majesty, really, as a left-handed pitcher. And that kind of bums me out, not just for Hjerpe, who has been dealing with arm problems now since he entered the organization, basically, but also for fans, because he's the opposite of Quinn Mathews in a lot of ways, where fans know Quinn Mathews, they've seen him in the future game, and we were just starting to see Cooper Hjerpe and just how good he was and how overblown that scouting characteristic is, that his command was terrible, because it wasn't the case. He just, he's unique and struggles sometimes. But all that's just to say that, like, hopefully this is just a setback. I mentioned on Twitter that it takes me back to the days of when I was fawning for Jordan Swaggerty over and over and over again. And then Swaggerty got hurt, and then he just never recovered. And, it's been a long time since the Cardinals have had an arm talent like Hjerpe, where he just can't get past that double-A leg because of either talent or injury. So I'm just really pulling for that kid to get healthy.
And, this could sound like Monday morning quarterbacking, even having this discussion here, but I know one of the things that you were critical about over time was why the Cardinals were babying him. If he was healthy, why don't you let him go out and pitch a full workload? And, I couldn't help but think, hey, maybe he would have had to cross this Tommy John surgery issue last season if he wasn't just throwing 4 innings or 60 pitches or whatever it was. But I don't know. The other side of the coin is, of course, you try to conserve the bullets so that when they reach the majors, they have as much runway as possible. And I don't want to second guess, but certainly we've seen, certainly Hjerpe, we've seen Tink Hens. Now we're seeing Tekoa Roby all on this spoon feed the innings, and their results look exceptional, and they're great pitchers. But let's face it, the second and third time through the lineup, the going gets tougher. And, I don't know if Tink Hens has ever seen a lineup for a third time in his whole career.
Yeah, only a couple times in Springfield last year, right? Like maybe twice, 2 or 3 times last year at most. Brian, this is obviously a very sensitive spot for me, because I think it's a perfect example. In one weekend, we had Quinn Mathews, who there's been no kid gloves with, and Cooper Hjerpe, who has been nothing but kid gloves. Both get hurt. You talk to any scout on the national side, all they've talked about is how repeatable and easy Quinn Mathews' delivery is. He's a pitchability guy. This isn't the kind of arm that's going to have arm injury. And all you've heard from the same people as Cooper Hjerpe, he's got this big arm injury concern. And granted, one is Tommy John, one is just shoulder soreness. It's not shoulder surgery. It's nothing. So it's
and we got to be careful. And we got to be careful to not overreact about that. You're right.
Exactly. But I just use that as, these arms are arms. I don't care what anybody says. You could treat these arms with kid gloves. You could push them to the brink, and without having a serious biomechanical understanding of how each body is working, I don't even think that can prevent these things. I just hate that last year for 2 months, Cooper Hjerpe was only getting to 65 pitches at a max. It wasn't until like July where he was at 80 pitches. And to me, that's just begging for arm injury. That, like, you're not pushing him. There's no push there. And then I think back, another thing I was incredibly critical of was last spring when the Cardinals were very deliberate about being very careful with Steven Matz in spring training. Like, all right, we got to be real careful with Matz to get him through the year. And sure, it got him to, he made like 4 straight starts to begin the year. He got through 4 innings. Of course, in the 3rd and 4th inning, he was getting rocked in all of those starts. And then he still went on the IL. And I think that hopefully as we get older, as baseball continues to grow, we start to see these things like,
Kyle, I understand now. Pardon me for interjecting again, but I'm at the point in life where I'm not sure I really want to get that much older. Why don't you take it for both of us?
Oh, yeah. You know what? Me too, Brian. I don't know what I'm thinking. If we could just get a little bit younger, if we could, maybe be a little bit more reckless. Who am I to say? But yeah, so I just think that there is really no telling. I think we're starting to understand the body and the way the body works a little bit better from a pitching standpoint and the pressure and stress put on an arm. But I don't think that babying anybody is going to work the way that you might think it would. So here, I guess we'll find out.
And, I sat down. I mean, we all handle this news differently. When I saw the Mathews news, I sat down and decided, okay, it's time to do a state of the pitching in the system and go back and look at what's happened. And what I learned was fairly sobering. First of all, we all remember the trade deadline trades in 2023, excuse me. Cardinals brought in 9 players, 6 of them were pitchers. Other than the end of 2023, that lost season when everybody was hurt, and so they threw Drew Rom in there to make 8 starts. Other than that, not a single one of those pitchers that the Cardinals got in that trade have contributed even 1 inning of Major League ball yet. Now, you can argue Roby still has a chance, sure. And, Matt Swanson has a chance. So, it's not as if they're completely shut out yet, but that great promise of trading all those guys so far has brought Thomas Saggese and not much else so far.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
The other thing, of course, is that now with Mathews on the shelf, 3 of the top 4 pitching prospects in the system are injured. And when you go down the list a little further, and of course, the one that isn't injured is Tekoa Roby, who has been injured since he's been with in the system, and is off to an exceptional start through 2 starts, but again, limited in number of innings as he's trying to build back up from last year's set of injuries. And to go further, at least in my top 20, or the Cardinal Nation's top 20, because Blake Newberry was a part of that too. There's 11 pitchers in our top 20. Of those 11 pitchers, only 2 of them have not spent time on the injured list in the last 2 years. And the 2 are Michael McGreevy and Max Radjic. They're the only ones. And McGreevy, it's easy to take McGreevy for granted because he's been around so long. But if you look, since McGreevy's been a pro, he's thrown 150 innings every year. Every single year he makes every start, goes deep into a lot of games. And, we've already talked about it before, but he's got to be the next man up when they need another start. Now, I know, they brought Graceffo up because of the timing of when the doubleheader came. But, I think now, especially with Mathews hurt, McGreevy has kind of got to be our great hope, so to speak, right?
Yeah, he's really the only bullet that they have right now. Because, even like right now, Sim Robersa's pitching as we're recording, and Robersa, he's just not there yet. We see tonight he's doing a lot of sweeper changeup, which are his 2 best pitches, and he's having his best results. But, like you said, we saw Graceffo get hurt. Graceffo is still working on his fastball. So yeah, it really is just McGreevy that you would feel comfortable with making a start.
Now, if you were on the let it rip approach as an organization, you'd bring up Tekoa Roby and say, okay, you get Mathews' spot in the rotation. I think probably they'll take Alex Cornwell and start him instead just to fill the gap. But, at some point in time, and Hence, technically Hence is on the Memphis injured list. Now, The fact is he's probably never set foot in AutoZone Park. He certainly hasn't pitched there. So, and he's on the 60-day IL, which means we won't see him until at least June. Mm-hmm. So, and, it's shrouded in mystery exactly what his injury really is. And, if it's how it's related to the things that happened last year. But it's definitely concerning right now. And the depth that we thought was there isn't there. As you said, Sem and Gordon Graceffo are both on the 40-man roster, so they could be called up if needed. But, neither one of those guys are knocking the door down.
Yeah, I think the only other name that I can think of, and they stretched him out a little bit. I think he pitched 3 1/3 in his most recent appearance out of relief. And of course, if he were to make a debut, he'd have to be added to the 40-man. Is Curtis Taylor, one of the driveline guys that they brought on in the off season, who's a minor league free agent. He's been really impressive. He's got some good stuff, but that's it. That's really all that they have. If it's not, and you're probably right, knowing the way that this organization, Alex Cornwell would probably be the guy that they would reinsert into the Memphis rotation. So I think it'll come down to one of those 2 guys. But yeah, that's it, Brian.
I'd love to see Roby. I'm voting right here. Bring Roby up and let him have at it.
Yeah, he made such an impression in spring training. I've changed my mind on everything. That's what I want, Brian. Let's do it.
10 strikeouts against 1 walk in 8 innings so far. Good start. Let's build on it.
Throwing a lot of strikes, and also with Roby getting swing and miss with his fastball against righties, which has been an issue with him. He's changed his fastball a little bit. Now we're seeing him get swing and miss with the fastball against righties, which he has not done in the past. So it's not just the stat line, it's also the becoming a better pitcher.
And there you go. That's why you listen to Wednesdays with Walton and Reis, to get that kind of insight from Kyle.
Yeah. We're not getting older, Brian. We're not going to
We're getting better. We're getting better. What was it we were talking about again? Anyway.
Yeah.
So last week, Kyle made, I thought, kind of a bold comment about a couple of guys in Palm Beach, hitters that are, mid-round guys that you wouldn't necessarily think might be difference makers, aren't at the top of the prospect list. You said that you thought Cade McGee and Josh Kross would be a couple of guys that could be impact difference makers for the system. All that's happened in the first 2 weeks of the minor league system is McGee was the player of the week in the Florida State League the first week, and now Kross hit home run on Friday, hit a home run on Saturday, some crazy exit velocities like 104 kind of exit velocities, 3 home runs in 3 days, and now Josh Kross is the Florida State League player of the week. This is really weird for a couple of reasons. Number one, that these guys were the guys you singled out, but also the fact that Palm Beach is kicking butt on offense. And this is a club that, dominated last year, but primarily behind pitching. And here's some of the numbers from Palm Beach so far through the first week and a half. First in batting average, 283, 20 points ahead of the next closest. Second in on-base percentage, 381. First in slugging, 491, 124 points ahead of the second closest in the league. First in OPS by 104 points. First in hits, first in runs, first in triples, first in home runs, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the Palm Beach offense, and there's not the big name guys. A lot of the big name guys have moved up to Peoria. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's even one of the guys that kind of disappeared last year, Jonathan Mejia. All of a sudden, Jonathan Mejia started hitting home runs and actually playing a pretty solid second base, although it's been kind of weird at short. But they're operating kind of how that pitching staff operated last year, regardless of who it was in. It was just next guy up, kind of like how the St. Louis Cardinals lineup is right now. Just, all right, next guy up. It doesn't have to be a bunch of over-the-fence contact, although they've done that. It's just they're producing runs. They're getting pitches to hit. Sometimes what's going on at low A, at Palm Beach in the Florida State League can be a little illusory, can be a little misleading from both a pitching and a hitting standpoint, because a lot of times pitchers will have success. Like I think about tonight's starter for Palm Beach, Tuesday night starter, Brant Thompson, the Cardinals' 17th round pick from Missouri State last year. And he throws 91 miles an hour, but he's had a lot of really good success because he throws strikes. Like he's going to work in the zone. He's going to throw strikes. And a lot of times the younger hitters get overmatched. So you'll see him have success, and then he'll probably never get above AA. That's just how it works. He might develop his stuff, and then sometimes it can work in reverse, where you just don't know if these huge, loud contact numbers and exit velocities that someone like Josh Kross is putting up is because he is a well-trained Division I college bat who is just feasting on pitchers trying to get it over the plate. Kind of like we saw with William Sullivan, who isn't in the organization anymore a couple of years back. But I think that this is a little different with Kross because he's hitting everything in every type of count, even breaking stuff. And he's on right now. And I think that is fueling the offense. And I think everybody's doing it. It's just, it seems like some of the organizational changes, whether it's Brock Hammett or whoever it ends up being, working in the league with Russ Steinhorn, it just seems like they have a plan. And kind of like what we saw with the Cardinals with Brant Brown. It just seems like they're down there with a plan, and it's in progress, and it's been fascinating to watch.
Now, and we can't also forget Gary Kendall, the manager at Palm Beach, who's had that team in the playoffs every year he's been in the system, and recognized by the Cardinals as the George Kissel Award winner last year, top guy in development. It's tough to manage in low A because of all the roster churn and the changes even before the draft comes. So, it's nice to see the Cardinals continue to have success in the Florida State League. As of right now, they're in first place. It's still very early. But a step up at Peoria, just the opposite. It took them, I think, 8 games to win their first. The pitching staff seems to have, the starting rotation seems to have shook out, but there's not a lot of horsepower on offense, at least yet, with the Peoria Chiefs. What are you seeing there?
Well, it's funny. I was going to tweet out something last week that I think Zach Levinson's about ready to get going. He was on everything. It's just that he wasn't having much in the way of success. And I heard Cody Schindler, right, the broadcaster for Peoria tonight. He said that that Zach Levinson is like 6 for his last 9 or something like
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
he had a double tonight.
Yeah, he started like 0 for 12 and then got crazy hot.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be huge. It seems like they just kind of like pushed all of their interesting hitting prospects to Double A too. With Juan Cho just coming back to Peoria after finishing his rehab at Palm Beach. Um, you know, also Joshua Baez not really doing much, having a little success here and there. It has not been pretty. It seemed like, a couple of weeks ago we talked about how Peoria can be a tough pitcher's environment this early in the year. It can also be a tough hitter's environment because of the weather. I do think that there's a little bit of a talent, I guess, hole there from like a high end prospect perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it's just no one's getting going yet. I think Levinson. I'm anxious to see how everything works out that Levinson is hitting and what he can do, because his swing looks good. It's just he didn't have the success until recently.
And in the rotation, it seems like Cade Winquist is in. Zach Showalter's not, at least at this point. Showalter's usage has been a little interesting through two. He had one kind of tandem start where he went long, and then his second time out, he went less than an inning. So I'm not necessarily sure what they're doing with Zach yet, but it looks like Winquist, Salas, Davila, Rincon, Saladin are their starters, and of course Chen-Wei Lin is on the injured list.
Yeah, it's been interesting, especially with Peoria, and also I guess actually with pitchers in the organization in general. It's amazing how often they've had like Zach Showalter is a perfect example. One great start or one great appearance, and then just kind of like trash. It's been like that. It's not just the starters, it's the relievers. I guess one of the positives in all of this is Bryson Mounts has pitched kind of out of his mind, taking some huge steps. But like Max Rajic, great first start, gets blown up in a second. It's been a very uneven start to the season for a lot of the pitchers in the organization, not just at Peoria.
But Springfield, you mentioned a couple of starters there from the Double A Springfield club in Mounts. And of course, we talked about Roby and Rajic. The others are Ishan Henderson and Pete Hansen. Their offense has been, crushed by injury. It seemed like their entire outfield, other than Chase Davis, is injured. So they had to bring up a couple of guys from Peoria and Palm Beach just to be healthy. But looks like Nathan Church is at least going out into rehab, so he'll be back soon. Springfield's always an interesting club to watch, and no exception this year.
Yeah. Also is, I guess one of the highlights of this past week, other than Chase Davis kind of slugging the ball, hitting the ball to the opposite field, having a lot of success, and also playing a pretty good center field, is we have JJ Weatherholt basically hitting everything now. He's hitting everything all over the place.
Like three or four multi-hit games in a row. Very, very encouraging to see.
Yeah. And with Leo Bernal swinging a really hot bat left-handed, I think when you and I started recording tonight, he was batting right-handed for the first time tonight, and I think I don't think he's gotten many at bats right-handed, but that 1, 2, 3 in particular of Chase Davis, JJ Weatherholt, and Leo Bernal is as advertised, which says nothing for how good Dakota Harris has been driving in runs in like the 4 or 5 hole, and also Jeremy Rivas, who is a defensive first option, who is just hammering the ball all over the place.
Yeah, and they found ways. Rivas and Weatherholt are both shortstops. Although Weatherholt, it's something I reported first in spring training we can talk about now because it's in the box scores, but Weatherholt's been playing some second base as well. And I applaud the Cardinals for giving him the opportunity to play multiple positions while he's still in Double A, so that when he gets to the majors, assuming there's not a starting job at shortstop, which we have to assume and hope, that he'll, not be learning new positions on the fly in the major leagues.
Yeah. It's been impressive. He's taken to it really quick. He's doing really well.
Yep. All right. So the Major League Club, just when they have kind of a clunker series, not kind of, a major clunker series in Boston, they kind of have a so-so series in Pittsburgh where they played the Pirates pretty evenly, in fact. Then they come home and play a really good team in the Phillies, and the pitching comes around and they start to look good. For me, it was very encouraging, not only that they had 13 shutout innings, but those 13 shutout innings were thrown by the guys at the back end of the rotation, Palante and Liberatore. What's your take on what's happening with St. Louis lately?
It's fun to watch. It's fun that the offense, you get kind of concerned that even one game, a day game in Pittsburgh, where they, get into extras and they don't hit, they score one run, that you think, all right, you get a little worried that maybe they've hit a brick wall. But to see them pick it right back up, I think I continue to have very complex thoughts about Matthew Liberatore as a starter. I think he kind of did what you and I talked about last week, Brian. I think we saw him go to his slider. He got a ton of swing and miss with the slider. They stuck with the one pitch that was working. They used it more than any other pitch, and I think that's why he had the best start that he's had in quite some time. He used his sinker late in starts. You had his velocity up throughout the entire start. Those are all huge things. So I've really enjoyed watching them. Even Miles Michaelis' start on Saturday was not an awful start. It wasn't great, but they're really fun to watch.
One of his better starts this year, I would say.
Yeah, getting swing and miss, which I didn't even know if he was capable of. I don't mean that to be as terse as it sounds, or as mean, or as
Well,
but
no, the numbers bear it out.
Yeah, especially against that lineup, that he had them completely flummoxed. And that was really cool to watch. So it's like each game just builds a little bit more momentum, like confidence and momentum that I have that this team is what this team has shown. And that's exciting. And of course, the Yohel Pozo, Pedro Pajes thing at catcher is just so fun. It's awesome that both of those guys are having the success they're having.
Yeah. And it, takes away with the offense continuing to hit without Herrera, it makes that loss a little less painful. You just hope that both he and Mason Wynn will be back relatively soon. Attendance isn't where you want it to be. I know it's a subject where anybody wants to be. It's a subject that you don't like to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because you made an interesting question, and that you asked an interesting question, and that is, what's the impact on FanDuel Sports subscriptions now that they have this new offering that allows folks to pay $20 a month and watch the games? Don't know the answer, but I would think that the Cardinals would really rather have the people in the stadium if they had to choose between the two, but it's better to keep the fans engaged however you keep them engaged. What was your thought process behind drawing that comparison?
I think a lot of times, when you're talking about tickets are gifts a lot. They're a big holiday drive. I'm going to get my brother a 4-pack tickets of weekend with bobbleheads or whatever. And if there isn't the interest in that in the off season, then you're going to see that right away to start the year in the stands. And that's all just to say, that's just one aspect of it. I think that what we've seen in the stands has been something that's built. It's been building and building and building and building over the years. And I don't necessarily think it's an accurate look on how Cardinal fans, which is a regional team, it's of course it's driven by St. Louis and its surrounding suburbs and area and parts of Illinois, but it's a regional sport, a regional team. It touches all over the place because of the Mighty Mocs, right? KMOX.
Well, and the fact that there were no other teams in the Midwest and South for many decades. That's what I mean. Growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, I was a Cardinals fan. That and Bob Gibson living there. But the fact is, at that point, there were no Royals, right? There wasn't anybody else in the Midwest. And, they were winning in the 60s as well. So that kind of
Exactly. So this is something that's building. And I don't think it's necessarily the attendance right now. While, again, there's 1,000 reasons for it. I don't think you can pinpoint one reason. I don't think it's John Mozeliak. I don't think it's ownership investment. I think those play into it. I don't think it's, the Cardinals not spending money in free agency. I think that plays into it. I just think there's 1,000 things over the last 5 to 10 years that have played into the part where we're at right now in early April 2025, where Cardinals fans aren't showing up, which includes stuff in downtown, political stuff in St. Louis that I'm not intelligent enough for, even though I've been born and bred and raised here, that supersede me. So
I think you're on a great point, and that is, it took time for this to happen, and it's going to take time, even if this young, exciting team, continues to score at this rate and, win more games and gets in the pennant race. It's going to take some time for people to believe it and for it to come back up. Now, by June, because you talked about the nature of the franchise being regional, which is true. But by June, when everybody's out of school and the weather heats up, if the team turns around on the field, I would expect to see attendance start to tick back up as well. And if that doesn't happen, then obviously there's more concern.
Exactly. I don't think we can learn anything from the attendance this early in the year other than everything's built to this point, and it's not just something that's built over an off season or a season or since 2023. This is something that's been building. I think back to the 2022 playoffs, Brian, where they didn't sell out those first two home games to the Phillies in that playoff. I could be misremembering, but I didn't think either of those two games had been sold out as playoff games. So this is just to take a step back, maybe not be as prisoner of the moment, to realize that this is something that's been building. And sure, I guess more fault in DeWitt in the front office, but I think those television numbers, especially when you compare, if we get to see them, there's no guarantee we'll get to see them or even hear about them. But if the Cardinals were to be open, I think that we would be able to really gauge the interest in the Cardinals in their viewing market compared to the subscription numbers at the beginning of April to the end of April. And how people are feeling about this team. A total guess. I just think that's more interesting than focusing overly heavy on attendance numbers when there's more to that than just the on-field product and fan discontent.
Well, the bottom line is what the late Al Davis said, right? Just win, baby. And
just win, baby.
They win, the fans will be back. That's
true.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're about at the end of our rope. I mean, at the end of our time for Wednesday with Walton and Reis this week. Kyle, just don't grow old in the next 7 days. Stay with us. You can keep this going for a long time after I croak.
I got a coffin or a cryo chamber somewhere, Brian, that's going to keep me kicking.
There you go. You and Ted Williams' head. All right. So at the Cardinal Nation, our team of local reporters are out, covering their teams, and their reports are showing up on the site. We have a daily recap of all the minor league games every morning that's free. So you can, if you don't follow the games as closely as Kyle does, each night you can come and get a quick summary and click on the box scores and see what happened across the system. And we continue to provide features. As I mentioned, I wrote a feature posted yesterday that went into detail about the Cardinals pitching pipeline and the injuries and what that's meant. So continue to come to Cardinal Nation and sample what we have. I think you'll really enjoy it. Kyle, any closing comments?
Nope. Let's go Cardinals.
All right. We'll talk to everyone next week. That'll be on the 23rd of April. Take care, everyone.